You know, back in the early 20th century, motion pictures were this brand new, powerful force changing America. But for African Americans, what they saw on screen was, well, it was often just insulting. It was filled with these demeaning caricatures. And it's in that landscape, this kind of hostile environment, that one man saw this new medium as more than just a business. He saw it as a chance to completely rewrite the story of his people. This is the story of William D. Foster.
All right, so here's how we're going to walk through his story. We'll start with the basics. Who was William D. Foster? Then we'll dig into his early life, how he broke into the business, and of course, his major contributions. We'll also look at the world he was operating in, and then wrap up with his later years and the legacy he left behind.
So, Section 1. Who was William D. Foster? We're talking about a man who was pioneering a new vision in American film. And that's not an exaggeration.
Let's just get straight to the core of it. The historical record is incredibly clear on this. William D. Foster was the first African American to establish a film production company. He did it in Chicago back in 1910 with the Foster Photoplay Company. Now, to put that in perspective for you, this was a full 5 years before Birth of a Nation came out and just completely changed the game. So he was truly at the forefront.
Okay, let's dive into his origins and early life. His journey took him from the racetrack to the stage. And to really get the filmmaker, you've got to understand the man behind the camera, right? His path into show business was definitely not a straight line. It's interesting, historical records actually disagree on his exact birth year, but his professional journey, that's really well documented. And it started somewhere you probably wouldn't expect.
So his first documented career move was at a New York racetrack. He was a paddock man and a clocker. But, it seems he pretty quickly found his real passion in the buzzing world of black entertainment, and not as a performer on stage, but as the guy behind the scenes, a publicity promoter for some of the biggest African-American musical stage comedies of that era.
And listen, we're not talking about small-time productions here. He was the publicity guy for absolute landmark shows like A Trip to Coontown, and he promoted the incredibly popular Indohomie and Abyssinia. These starred the legendary comedy duo Burt Williams and George Walker. I mean, this put him right in the middle of everything, at the very heart of black show business.
So from there, his professional journey takes him to Chicago. And this is a really important move, because Chicago, even before the Great Migration really kicked off, was already becoming this major hub for black culture and entertainment. And when Foster got there, he didn't just dip his toes in. No, he jumped right in and became one of the scene's most important figures.
And he did it by holding down two really key roles at the same time. First, he was the business manager at Robert Mott's legendary Pekin Theatre, booking all the black vaudeville acts. At the same time, he was also an entertainment journalist, writing under the name Juli Jones for big papers like the Chicago Defender and the Indianapolis Freeman. So think about that. He was booking the acts and writing the reviews. He knew this business from every single angle.
All right, so that brings us to his major contributions, specifically the Foster Photoplay Company. I mean, with all these deep connections in theater and media, Foster was perfectly positioned for what he did next. It was his most ambitious project yet. In 1910, he took everything he knew about business, and he paired it with his vision for black representation, and he created the Foster Photoplay Company.
Now, the company itself didn't last for a super long time, but its impact was huge. So it was founded in 1910. By 1913, it premiered its first film, The Railroad Porter. Between 13 and 16, they produced several other short films, all with all-black casts. And then around 1917, the company ceased operations. But that short window of time, man, it was absolutely groundbreaking. And if you look at the films he actually produced, you can see the kind of range he was going for. You've got comedies like The Railroad Porter and a slapstick one called The Fall Guy. But then he also did a detective film, The Butler, and even a melodrama. What was the common thread? The characters. They had jobs, they were respectable people. It was a universe away from the awful stereotypes you'd see in films made by white production companies at the time.
And look, we don't even have to guess why he was doing this. He told us himself, in his own words, writing in the Indianapolis Freeman, he said, "The motion picture allowed the colored man a means for portraying the finer and stronger features of his particular life." Wow. So his company wasn't just about making movies for fun. It was a powerful act of cultural self-definition.
So now we have to talk about the public and historical context. Because to really get what Foster was doing, you have to understand the world he was doing it in. He was a filmmaker completely against the grain. He wasn't working in some friendly, supportive environment. No way! The media landscape was hostile, and it was just about to be taken over by one of the most notorious films ever made.
And that film, of course, was Birth of a Nation, which came out in 1915. It was a smash hit, the biggest movie of its time, and it glorified the Ku Klux Klan. It actively promoted these hateful stereotypes. This is the cultural tide that Foster was swimming against. He actually said that his work was meant to offset so many insults to the race. He was creating a direct response.
But having a powerful vision is one thing. Making it a reality is another. And he faced some massive challenges. The historical documents point to what was basically an economic boycott. The big distribution companies, they wouldn't touch his films. White-owned theaters, they refused to show them. On top of all that, he just couldn't secure stable investors. And when you put all that together, it meant his company just couldn't turn a profit.
And you can hear the frustration in his own words. After his company closed, he wrote about his disappointment, specifically with the lack of financial support from inside the Black community. He said, if our colored people would pool their money, they would not only reap unlimited returns, but would do the race a great service. He saw it so clearly. Pooling their money was the key to taking control of their own image.
So, what happened after the Foster Photoplay Company shut down? Well, this wasn't the end of his story. We're going to look at his later years and legacy, a pioneer's final chapter. He was a survivor. He adapted, went back to using the skills he'd learned early on before making one last move back into the world of film.
Okay, so here's a quick look at his life after the company. In 1917, he went back to journalism, working as a distribution manager for the Chicago Defender. For the next decade or so, he worked a bunch of different jobs, even selling sheet music. But then, in 1929, he moves to Los Angeles. And get this, he gets appointed director at the Hollywood Pathé Corporation. So he's back in the game, producing musical shorts with Black artists for a major studio, right as sound is taking over. He passed away suddenly in LA on April 9, 1940. He was 79 years old.
So when you boil it all down, what's his legacy? I think the best way to put it is a foot-in-the-door achievement. He was the one who kicked that door open. He proved that it was possible to make films with Black casts for Black audiences. He created the blueprint, really. He provided the proof of concept for the whole race film industry that came after him, which was led by other pioneers like the great Oscar Micheaux.
But there's a really tragic postscript to his story. After all of that work, after being the very first, after having this incredible vision, the number of his films that are known to survive today is zero, a flat zero. His entire cinematic output is considered lost to history.
And that just leaves us with this one big, lingering question. How might the history of American cinema, and maybe even the history of America itself, be different if pioneers like William D. Foster had actually gotten the financial and distribution support they needed to thrive? Just imagine what could have been if his voice hadn't been held back, but was instead amplified for everyone to hear.